Dementia Researcher with a blogger narrating.
When I think about how I got into clinical research, it's people that come to mind. Many of them are positive role models, and particularly people who encouraged me at crucial moments. There are also negative examples of people I don't wish to emulate, but perhaps I'll skirt gracefully past them. One person I don't think I'll ever be able to thank enough is the late Professor John Starr. I went to see him on the recommendation of Professor Ian Deary, another supporter I'm hugely grateful to, early on in my Old Age Psychiatry specialist training. His erudition was amazing, and I emerged from our first meeting with 2 book recommendations, one on New Testament Greek and the other on cognitive epidemiology, and the makings of a fellowship application which ultimately led to my PhD. I had excellent PhD supervisors in John and Professor David Batty, at that time at the University of Glasgow, now UCL, and one thing I particularly appreciated was the flexibility they gave me. I remember John saying early on that I should read whatever I liked and that we would get it into the thesis somehow. My PhD was funded by the charity Alzheimer Scotland, and the funding was administered by the then Scottish Dementia Clinical Research Network, now the NRS Neuroprogressive and Dementia Network. Because of this, I was invited to the network's conferences and training days, and it was this exposure and getting to know the clinical studies officers that I had my first real exposure to clinical research. The SDCRN was set up to increase the amount of clinical dementia research happening in Scotland, and so almost everyone was relatively new to this area, which meant we could all learn together. The network was initially co-chaired by John Starr and Professor Peter Connolly, another person from whom I've learned a great deal. Peter powerfully communicated the potential of dementia research in Scotland and the hope it entailed in his conference presentations, and he had a major impact on our specialty as chair of the UK-wide Faculty of Old Age Psychiatry of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. He encouraged me to take on new responsibilities, including joining the Health Improvement, Protection and Services Grant Review Committee at the Chief Scientist Office of the Scottish Government, and in due course to apply to take over the running of the NDN from him when he retired. People talk a lot about the need to say no to things in an academic career, but it's also important to choose carefully which important things to say yes to, and wise counsel from a senior colleague can be very helpful here. Another senior colleague I'm very grateful to is Professor Ian McKeith at the University of Newcastle, who was my mentor through the Academy of Medical Sciences. Working in Edinburgh, I was keen to hear from someone who had built a career out with the Golden Triangle of Oxford, Cambridge and London. Ian was very generous with his time, and the meetings we had across a number of years were invaluable to my development during my time as a clinical lecturer. He listened to me and thoughtfully made suggestions about how to think of whatever quandary I was facing. I still think back to his advice and the conversations we shared. As I've grown in independence, it could be easy to forget some of the struggles of earlier stages in my career. I try never to forget the pressure which came with putting in grant and fellowship applications when my salary depended on the outcome. The inevitable failures which still come, all too frequently, are still difficult, but having an open-ended contract is a privilege I make sure to remember, especially when advising and supporting colleagues at an earlier stage. Applying for post-PhD and or post-CCT funding, especially at a time when many have family or other financial responsibilities, must be one of the most stressful stages in a researcher's life. With all this in mind, I try to prioritise people in how I work as a clinical academic. It is researchers who do the research, and creating a supportive and encouraging working culture is really important to me. Similarly, trying my best to support individuals at different stages of their research careers is a priority, and I look back to these fantastic examples I've had and think, what would John do? And that's when I remember that one of John's favourite approaches was to be so hands-off that I had to work out what to do by myself. And sometimes that was the best lesson of all.
Thank you for listening. Join the Dementia Research bloggers and share your own views.